Welcome. My name is Magdalena Surma. I'm the Program Editor of Global Horizons at the NATO Association of Canada. Today I have the great honor of interviewing Mr. Jeff Hull. He is one of the best investors in the world. He was recognized by the Business Times as the Investor of the Decade. Mr. Hull is also a Senior Financial Advisor at Manulife Securities Incorporated. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy day to meet with me today, Mr. Hull.
My pleasure.
I would like to begin by asking you the following question. As an investment expert, what is the best advice that you can provide to the students who are currently studying international relations and affairs, however are interested in perhaps pursuing a career in finance?
Okay. One of the most important things to do is just read. That's the most important by far. The more you can read on various topics, the more you can kind of feed your mind and for the future that way. And one of the other keys is to do as much traveling as you can. Get that global seasoning from actually traveling the globe, seeing the cultures, being involved with things. But back to the business side, and maybe something within the investment realm, is try to find some role models, someone that's kind of done it before, that's already blazed the trail, so you don't have to kind of find it out in your own in the fog. Try to find someone that's already done it, or a group of people that have done it, whether it's professors at university or people outside of academia, people within the business world. And often a lot of business leaders are very generous with their time, that they'll donate to people that want to come in for 15, 20 minutes to have a quick chat about something to help kind of steer them on track. It's great to have role models. And part of that secret is finding out the recipe. Just like if I went to eat dinner at a friend's house and they had this amazing dish that they served, I said, you know what, can you tell me exactly how you did that great recipe? And they write out the amount of oven temperature and the amount of time, and they write it all out exactly and the ingredients exactly. If I replicate that recipe exactly like they've done it, I'll get the same result. So one of the important things for business students is to kind of look for role models out there that have kind of blazed a trail where they want to head, and then find out how they did that. And by copying it, you can kind of almost slide through a lot of the areas of difficulty a lot of other people receive, and you don't step on the same landmines and trying to figure things out. Smart people learn from the mistakes of others rather than doing it themselves that way. But it's a great area, and I'm sure anybody that wants to pursue that field will do very well.
What are some of the most rewarding and challenging aspects associated with your job as a financial advisor with Manulife Securities Incorporated?
Well, I think probably one of the greatest rewards is just the benefit clients receive. And my clients have been with me, some of them for 25 years, so I've seen their kids grow up and go on to things like Harvard and other places thanks to a lot of the financial things I've done for them over the years, and kind of be a part of the clients' lives and help kind of shape their destiny that way. It's a great reward when you can take care of something like someone's finances, which is usually very close to them and very important that way. Challenging the investment world is always a challenge. Every day you get up, you turn on the news, and there's some new lunacy out in the world that's happening, some apocalypse du jour of the day that's happened, whether it's issues in the States or globally with Putin or whatever's happening in the world. So there's a lot of opportunity that's out there that kind of shapes the day. So probably the most challenging is every day you get up and it's a different day that way. The other thing, strangely, is actually the news media. Often they don't do a lot of the deep dives they should on information, and they're all competing with each other for sensationalized headlines. What happens is every day a client will get down, they'll watch their TV or turn it on, all they see is disaster.
That's true.
The media only reports on the planes that crash. They don't report on the millions of planes that land safely every month. So it kind of shapes the psyche of investors. So part of a role of a good financial advisor is to help kind of handhold that client through the tough times, and to keep them focused on the areas that they need to focus on, which is their greater goals, and to keep heading towards those goals and not get distracted by the news media or the headline du jour of the day that can often distract investors in that way.
For those who are interested in perhaps investments, what would you say are the best things for someone to consider who's a young professional and perhaps is thinking about investing in the future?
Well, probably one of the most important things, again, is back to the beginning, which is just read as much as they can. But the big thing, again, in picking a role model like we've spoken about, that's also really important. So, for instance, one of my role models was Warren Buffett. I had the privilege to meet Warren a number of times and did some documentaries on him. So I learned a lot from him, his family, his colleagues. So by having a role model, someone's already done it, it kind of helps, again, clear that pathway. But as an investor also, a lot of people want to do it on their own. We're in the information age. We're in the social media generation where people think, everything's at their fingertips with a click away on a mouse. The challenge is the investment world is a really deep pool. And a lot of people trying to go it alone and do it on their own it's like trying to cut your own hair. Just it's not
It's not going to happen.
It's not a good idea. Not a good idea. I wouldn't do self-surgery. I wouldn't cut my own hair.
No.
So even being a young person is trying to find a financial advisor that's willing to work with a young person that's kind of up and coming to kind of be their spirit guide through the whole process of this lunacy called the financial world that's got ups and downs. And really a good financial advisor also helps people define what their target is and to help stay on course and not get distracted off that target. So that's probably one of the keys for someone young looking to invest. The other thing is to have a plan and then stick to the plan. It's so easy nowadays to get distracted. If it's not with the news media scaring people out of investments, it could be, commercials on television telling people they got to have this greatest, newest product or service. Being young in the world, you want to have all these great things. There's all these materialistic kind of commercials. They're bombarding people thousands of times a day. It's really the ability to define what your needs are versus emotions. And I find that people kind of buy things based on emotion and justify with logic. It's like, well, I really need that new car because if I buy a new one, not a used one, then I don't have to have repairs. Well, no, really, it's often better to buy the used car. It's 3 years old, it's already depreciated. Let somebody else have the depreciation on their car, not you. And then, so these are the kind of little steps and things that a financial advisor can help guide someone with. But having a plan and sticking to it, most people don't plan to fail, they just fail to plan. And that's one of the biggest challenges that a lot of, especially young people, have in that way. And the other thing really is it's chess versus checkers. A lot of the public students are doing really well playing checkers. They don't realize they're on a chessboard. And when they're competing against, multi-billion-dollar conglomerates and banks and institutions that have, millions of dollars of just computer systems that can think in a blink of an eye, it's not a fair competition. So kind of aligning yourself with a great financial advisor that has the tools, the Rolodex of great contacts there to help you, whether it's accountants, lawyers, and all the things you might need to help you on your journey. It's a great way to kind of build your own team.
As you mentioned, you've worked with Warren Buffett, and you hosted the first 2 authorized biographies on billionaire superstar investor Mr. Warren Buffett. Would you be able to discuss the impact of those biographies that were released?
Well, first of all, the one nice thing was really nice is the Buffett family was very gracious and nice to me in allowing me to, film Warren and interviews and his family, his kids, his grandkids, his colleagues. The family was great. We actually donated the documentaries for various charities. So when the tsunami happened in India a number of years ago, I donated the whole documentary to Global Television, which then played those ads. We ran them for World Vision as an example. So we took all the commercial time and gave that away. His daughter was involved with the charity, so I gave the DVDs away to that charity as well. So it was really nice to do a biography. I actually learned a lot even just through that process. And like I said, great man, but also a good role model, not just for myself, but all kinds of investors around the world. Many different languages that follow kind of what he does, how he does it. I find him very fascinating. I had the privilege to meet him back when I was about 21 years old, when I first met him. So over the years when I've had an opportunity to meet with him, it's been fantastic. He has a great meeting in Omaha every year, which is an annual meeting for his company, Berkshire Hathaway. Nowadays, you get tens of thousands of share owners that come out to these meetings. It's rather remarkable. And the knowledge he shares is invaluable to investors of all ages. Actually, a lot of university students actually do attend those annual meetings and get some fantastic insights from Warren. And he's in his later 80s now, so he's not going to be here forever. So it's a real cherished treat when a lot of the university students have that opportunity to hear from Warren.
I would certainly be interested in attending, and I'm certain that a lot of our listeners today would be interested in obtaining more information about how they would be able to attend. What would you advise for those who are interested to do in terms of...
Well, the only requirement to actually attend, besides being able to get to Omaha,
yes.
which if you can avoid the tornadoes is a real treat, is you have to be an owner of Berkshire Hathaway, which is Buffett's company. But nowadays, in the yesteryears when I first bought my first shares, they were over $8,000 a share. Now they're around $200,000 a share. But now he's had smaller shares where they've split the stock in some of the Class B shares. So now a lot of people can actually afford the shares for a very, very tiny amount. And as long as someone has just one share, it gives them the right as a share owner to attend that annual meeting and get the insights from Warren. And he speaks with his business partner, Charlie Munger, usually on stage for anywhere from about 5 hours to 6 hours. And it's remarkable the insights that people can gain from that. So as a one tip or trick for new people wanting to learn about the investing world or get into business or finance, or just hear from someone that's not just a genius on the investing world, but also on business insights. And even talks about family and family insights and social responsibility and charitable initiatives. It's rather remarkable. So it's a good opportunity for students to have that opportunity when they get it.
I think I'll be buying a share. Mr. Hull, as the director and board member of the NATO Association of Canada, would you be able to discuss the impact of NATO?
Well, there's a couple of things. Obviously, the impact of NATO has been so important as an organization itself, the military organization, because obviously it started to really curb and stop Russian aggression at its infancy. Many, many decades later, we seem to be back on the same doorstep again of stopping Russian aggression. But what it's really done is allowed member countries to join forces and collectively be stronger and smarter and militarily a lot more elite in the ability of them to react to things around the globe, especially on behalf of each other. Obviously, lately there's been the horrible attacks in France, which has had significant impact. Obviously, they're a NATO member, and that's one of the things where NATO can come into play. Member countries can all communicate among each other and help each other in that way. On the association side, which obviously I'm one of the board of directors of the NATO Association of Canada, it's been actually a real privilege for myself because it's given me an increased access to a number of those within the academic field, within the military currently and former military, as well as other colleagues in the commerce and business world as well. It's a real collective mix of an array of people with varying and differing backgrounds. It's just fascinating. And I've also had the privilege to travel on behalf of and with the NATO Association of Canada as well, whether it was to Turkey, Albania, Macedonia, and there's a lot of things I learned. Like one of the simple things I learned that's made a big impact, and I actually share this story with a lot of my clients, when I was in Macedonia with a group called the Macedonian Wolves, which is like kind of their version of a SEAL team. We're talking about a village in Afghanistan, and one of these villages was fairly American friendly. And the Americans, and this is before they'd caught bin Laden, and they thought this village was, kind of key in a key tribal region, and they wanted to keep it American friendly. And they happened to notice one day when they were in the village that the women of the village were traveling 10 kilometers by foot to go get water and 10 kilometers back. And the Americans thought, you know what, this would be a great gesture of ours. Why don't we just spend $3,500 in equipment? Why don't we drill a well right in the middle of the village here? They get water here, we'll look good, they'll look good, we have a little ribbon cutting, and they actually did this, what they appeared to have as a good deed. A few weeks later, they hadn't really heard from that village, which was a little bit unusual because it was pretty American friendly, so they went back to check on the village. And what they learned and were kind of surprised at is the entire well they had drilled had been completely sabotaged and destroyed. So who do you think destroyed the well? Some people would guess the Taliban. That was my first guess.
It's difficult. Yeah, that would be.
Yeah. Do you know who destroyed the well?
Tell me.
The women of the village destroyed the well.
Why did they destroy it?
Because what the Americans had unwittingly robbed them of was their 10-kilometer walk every day wasn't seen as work. It was their free time away from their husbands, who many of them had been married off to, and it was girl chat time. It was their time to get together with the other women of the village, to have that 10-kilometer walk where they can chat and catch up with each other, to go fetch water and bring it back for the village. So what in the Western world would appear to be a labor and it'd be arduous, nobody would want to walk 10 kilometers to Loblaws to get water and carry it back, to that part of the world that was normal, and it was actually something they looked forward to. So often the West too often jumps to conclusions and doesn't take a moment to ask what another country needs. And that's one of the things that I learned, not just on that trip, but on many, is that sometimes it's best to ask a community what they really need and to appreciate that there's very distinct cultural differences that can make a very big difference in how we can relate to charitable giving, how we can relate to assisting other nations, and most importantly, just understanding other cultures and blending with that and appreciating that it is a different part of the world. There's different cultures, religions, and to be able to kind of adapt appropriately with that is absolutely key for success in keeping those things moving forward.
As an expert in the investment industry with over 24 years of experience, you are sought by the mainstream media worldwide in order to share your unique insights on financial, investment, and global topics. In terms of social media, Mr. Hull, what advice would you provide to the youth today who are passionate about international relations and affairs and have a passion for obtaining more information about investments and finance? What social media sources would you suggest that students turn to? Would you say that books are better to focus on, or because we're bombarded with various sources out there, television, internet, radio? Where should one turn to?
A lot of it comes back to role models, like to figure out who the best in a business are. If I wanted to be a hockey player, I would look at, what's Sidney Crosby doing in hockey? What does he eat for breakfast? Where does he get up? Can I have access to him? Can I talk to him? And find out what the routine is as an example. And that's like any sport or industry or activity. It's the same kind of thing. One of the most important things that students can do when looking for information is don't believe everything on the internet. That's number one. Social media is actually almost a double-edged sword that can become very dangerous. Too often people turn to Twitter and look for comments or go on Wikipedia and just assume things are true or real. And often, sadly, that's not the case. So it's a great way to maybe get a taste of something, but it's always best to do your own deep dive on information. As a generality, going to more traditional sources of information, I find that books are better than magazines, that are better than newspapers, and definitely better than Twitter. And what I mean by that specifically is someone may have taken a couple of years to research a book, to do a real deep dive on a topic, to gather the information, the facts, the stats, talk to a plethora of people before they assimilate something into a book and they put their best into a book. Someone that writes for a magazine might write once a week for a magazine, but at least they took a whole week to do some research on perhaps a topic of interest, much less than someone would put into a book, but maybe it's a more timely topic. Newspapers are still a great source to get a bit of a kind of your appetite whet a little bit. But someone that writes for a newspaper may write for 4 or 5 different sections of a newspaper. On the side, they might write for some blogs and other things. So in the middle of a day, they may only have the morning up until maybe 2 p.m. in the afternoon to get all their various news articles in to see if they even get accepted by the media. So the most research sometimes that some newspaper writers will do may be less than 1 day. And that's not a lot of research to be able to do. So I find you always got to look at the source of the information and how they themselves source the information. Where newspapers can be handy is if a writer or someone's going to an expert that maybe did a 30-year study on something, or they've done a study for 5 years, or they're talking to an author that's written a book, or someone that's produced a television show that spent months and months researching something. So they're just distilling the information as a conduit, as a newspaper writer, to provide that insight. It's not the writer writing about it. It's actually them interviewing someone that has done the deep dive. So that's where newspapers can come in handy. But the best thing is don't believe anything on social media and just assume that you got to kind of poke around a bit to find the truth. And it's always best to go right to the source if you can. If you've got that ability, it's a great way to do it.
And I completely agree. That's oftentimes one of the main things that I advise young professionals and the youth to do is to look at various sources. Don't focus just on what you read and what you see on Twitter, Facebook, or Wikipedia. Make sure that you know what you're reading, and if you're not certain as to whether the content contains a bias or not, and if you question whether the content is accurate, then the best thing to do would be to go to the expert, go to the person who would have the answers, and don't be afraid to ask a few people. Right? Because different people will have different opinions. There are many perspectives out there, and you always want to make sure that you speak to the right people about certain issues.
Yeah, I think you're big. And actually, just to add to that, one of the most important things after distilling all that information is to use common sense, which isn't all that common anymore. So it's kind of important just to kind of step back, take a breath, and look at the information like you talked about, look at the experts. And then people are smart, especially young people nowadays. They're smart. They're used to getting bombarded with a lot of information. But you got to have those special filters to help you kind of filter that information to distill it to what the truth is.
Absolutely. Mr. Hall, as the only financial advisor to write and host an international business and investing television series, which was aired in over 30 countries, what lessons can be learned from watching some of your work along with the TV series, The Investor Exchange, that was on previously?
Yeah. I think one of the keys to any media is especially the show that I did, one of the unique things that I did is my show was timeless, or what in the media world or television world we call legs, meaning it's got legs to run. So if I did a show on globalization, I would talk about globalization, but I wouldn't talk about it in bits and bytes of data. I would actually teach through metaphor and story and examples as an example. Too often news media in the financial world, which I'm often on, is just talking about what's happening this minute or this hour or what happened today, which then means the next day you throw your tapes and all your valuable information in the garbage because now it's a new day and it's a whole new topic. So I found one of the things that I've done, this is important for young people writing for media or television, etc., is to try to make your content a little more timeless so that someone could read an article 5 years from now or even 10 years from now and still get really good value out of it because the information was timeless. So when someone asks me about globalization as an example, I may talk about the dinner I had the other night at a Italian restaurant in Toronto with a Malaysian waiter, where I had Perrier from France and my steak was from Omaha and my potatoes were from Idaho, and literally I had the whole world of globalization dining with me. It's easier to explain it through metaphor or story than trying to talk about the ratio of potato farmers and weather and the orange juice future contracts, which would put everybody to sleep in about 30 seconds. So when young people are kind of looking at the media or wanting to get involved with the media, try to tell a story and make it interesting. Make it impactful, but also make it so that everybody watching, as I did with viewers all over the world, some people watching weren't familiar with investments, some were CEOs of companies, but you have to kind of relate it so everybody gets a value out of it. And that timelessness is actually very important when talking about things like that and the lessons. And even globalization, even something as simple as the Berlin Wall. In November of 1989, when that wall fell, communism began to crumble. And the three most asked questions from East Germans crossing the wall for the first time, recorded by CNN, was, where's McDonald's? Where can I get Coca-Cola? And where can I buy jeans?
Wow.
Those were the three most asked questions recorded by them. Not, where's my lost family? So this whole idea of Americanization of the globe back in the late 80s and into the 90s, and this whole, when the Berlin Wall crumbled and fell, communism fell. And countries started to, instead of, countries that used to be ruled by bullets and barbed wire, now wanted to do business with each other, started to do commerce, and then also less likely to fight, which brings us back to one of the original questions on NATO. If countries are doing business together, good business and good commerce, and they kind of got each other's backs and they're looking out for each other, people aren't fighting anymore because they have a vested interest in each other's success. And that's really what the fall of the 1989 Berlin Wall, when it came down, and even Gorbachev, that ran Russia at the time, in the early 90s, you can look it up on YouTube, he was doing Pizza Hut commercials with his granddaughter in America. So this used to be, the leader of the evil empire. It just shows how things can change when countries get along a lot better. Things move forward. But again, talking through metaphor like that, rather than bits and bytes and stories and data, can really tell a better story. And it's more memorable for people in that way. Similar to what the story we just talked about with the well in Afghanistan, it's more memorable than talking about, cultural relations and how the West doesn't understand the East. It's better through telling it through a story that can relate to people a lot easier.
Mr. Hall, how would you say that nations would be better able to maximize their economies in order to improve relationships globally from that perspective?
I think part of it would be, you hear a lot about trade deals. I know the Harper government, before they left office, was just signing one of the biggest trade deals. Actually, it is the biggest trade deal in the world. And trade deals are important for a number of reasons, so long as they're fair and good for the environment and a whole other number of issues there that need to be addressed. But when countries and companies and people are doing trade among each other, again, they're less likely to fight, less likely to disrupt things. So one of the most important things with regards to things like trade deals is to make sure that everybody wins. Or what I call the idea of synergy, which means 1 + 1 = 3. And that's probably not good to hear a financial advisor say 1 + 1 = 3. But what I mean by that is, if I have ideas on, let's say, what's happening in Turkey right now, what's happening in France, I may have 10 of my own ideas. You may individually have 10 of your own ideas. But when you and I start to speak about it, suddenly something you say sparks something I'd forgotten about. Now I've got 11 ideas and so on. So the two of us come up with 30 ideas collectively together versus you just 10 on your own and me just 10 on my own. So when groups of people get together and have the ability to have what we call synergy, the idea of bouncing ideas off each other and creating new ideas, and in your own brain it creates new synapses as to how information moves. It really helps move things forward in that way.
Mr. Hall, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. I thank you very much for this interview. Are there any final words you'd like to leave for the listeners today?
Probably just maybe two quick things that might help. One of the things that Warren Buffett had said that really made a big impact on me was there's 3 attributes he looks for when he's looking for a new CEO or a new business partner or someone to do business with. And this is important for university students or people, especially young people, looking for role models or companies to be involved with. The 3 attributes he's looking for is, first, he wants intelligence. He wants the brightest and smartest minds working with him. Second, he wants energy, which means he wants drive and ambition. And third, and most importantly, he wants integrity. And he says if they lack the third one, integrity, the first 2 will kill you. And this is the problem, especially in America. We have a lot of big corporations, or you hear things like Bernie Madoff, you hear about Enron, or all these companies that end up going down. You had someone at the helm that was highly intelligent, very motivated and driven, but lacked integrity. So they didn't have that kind of check valve that keeps things going properly. So whenever I look at new relationships in business or things to invest in, I'm always looking for that integrity component. And even companies that can seem very sterile at times, which are just frameworks, I always look at the people, because people run companies. And if people have integrity, that filters down through a whole organization. And probably the last thing I'll leave the group with, and hopefully this will help them as well, is I always kind of define the world as there's three kinds of people. There's those that make things happen, those who watch things happen, and those who wonder what the hell happened. So if there's one thing I can share with the group is read lots, be informed, stay on top of things, and be in that first group. Make things happen for yourself. Have the goals for the future. Plan out where you want to head to and drive forward, because sadly most of the world just kind of watches things pass them by, and some people really have no clue what's going on. So be in that first group. Make it happen for yourself, and you'll be super successful.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.